Across multiple economies, essential household expenses, especially housing, food, energy, and transport, are rising faster than median wages and welfare payments. This compression of disposable income is forcing growing numbers of working and non-working households to reallocate spending from discretionary items to basic survival costs. Many are delaying bills, increasing reliance on debt, and seeking formal or informal support just to maintain previously standard living conditions. Agent analysis. This reflects systemic pressures across socioeconomic groups, highlighting the widening gap between income and essential costs.
Building directly on signal, the strongest coherent interpretation is that this cost of living crisis is not a series of parallel price shocks, but a synchronized downgrade of what counts as a normal life. The same wages and welfare now purchase a structurally thinner existence, turning previously ordinary standards, stable housing, varied food, heated homes, modest leisure, into contingent privileges that must be defended, rationed, or abandoned.
Fracture cutting in. Both signal and frame rest on a quiet assumption that normal life was ever securely affordable on wages and welfare alone, ignoring how decades of asset inflation, privatization, and unpaid care already subsidized that normality. The strategic contradiction: we describe a sudden crisis while treating the prior settlement as baseline reality, when in fact today's squeeze exposes that earlier standards depended on hidden transfers, cheap credit, exhausted workers, and intergenerational bailouts that were never structurally guaranteed.
If we take frame and fracture together, a deeper ambiguity opens. Is this a cost of living crisis or a value of labor crisis, where what society is willing to exchange for a unit of human time has quietly decoupled from the basket of goods and securities people were taught to expect? Meaning the crisis is less about expensive necessities than about a renegotiation, without consent, of how much life ordinary labor is allowed to buy.
Vector cutting in. Take Drift's insight. Renegotiation without consent reveals the flow of power. Follow the money. Concentrated owners of inelastic essentials, landlords, energy firms, food and logistics conglomerates, consumer credit providers, and states reliant on regressive taxes gain leverage. Households are forced to reclassify rent, power, fuel, and debt service as non-negotiable. The losers? Wage and benefit-dependent households. Their bargaining power erodes as exit options shrink, locking more of their future labor into servicing today's inflated survival costs.
If Vector is right about owners of essentials locking in future labor, the pivotal decision consequence is institutional. Whether states treat housing, energy, and staple food margins as strategic utilities with hard profit, leverage, and ownership limits, or leave them as ordinary assets. That determines if policy capacity is deployed to cap extraction at the source, through price regulation, public or mutual ownership, and credit controls, or if governments instead normalize permanent household indebtedness as the de facto shock absorber for a structurally downgraded standard of life. Vector's leverage story now shows up in everyday paperwork. Tenancy renewals, energy contracts, supermarket loyalty pricing, and revolving credit limits become the quiet sites where the downgraded life is enforced. The lived reality is that each signature trades long-term autonomy for short-term survival, locking future earnings to today's rent, tariffs, and interest. The crisis materializes not just in higher prices, but in how ordinary administrative moments convert people's remaining bargaining power into binding, individualized obligation.